Hello, Substack Live. Hello, Andrew Greer. It's nice to
Hello,
see
Jennifer.
you.
Yes, good to see you too.
Yes, and if you're watching us right now, for those of you who do not know us, let us introduce ourselves. My name is Jennifer Taylor. I am the editor and founder of East Wing Magazine. And East Wing Magazine is a publication that covers America's First Ladies, present and past. And we are getting ready to celebrate our third anniversary here on Substack. And Andrew, you are a songwriter and a singer, producer,
Mhm.
author, filmmaker, and tell us a little bit.
Whatever. Yeah. Yes, yes. My home base is as a songwriter and in music, but over time I got into film through various interview series that I was directing and producing. And one of those films that ended up on PBS and now is on Amazon is called Plain Spoken. And that led me into the doors of Plains, Georgia, which is where I live now. And of course, Plains is famous for being the lifelong hometown of President Jimmy Carter and First Lady Rosalynn Carter. And so that's how you and I first got connected,
Yes, yes.
was through my residence here in Plains. So it kind of, in some ways, Jimmy and Roseland shifted my whole life. I lived in Nashville for most of my adult life since college, and for the last 3 to 4 years, I've lived in Plains, Georgia now.
Yes, you're right. So you and I know each other through your association with the Friends for Jimmy Carter, and you and I've had on and off conversations about what drew you to Plains and what drew you to the Carters, and I was hoping you could, walk us through that a little bit again because it really is a fascinating story.
Sure, and also let me say congratulations for your 3rd anniversary. I love that the first article, the first writing for, East Wing that was published was about Roseland, so just throwing that in there. I'm sure we'll get to that, but,
Yeah.
yeah, my story, I was born in the Reagan era, and so the Carters, when I was growing up in the '90s, were a bit of, history. Their legacy as really profound peacemakers, humanitarians, their pursuit of fair elections and equal rights across the globe was happening, but I don't know that it had really taken resonance in the mainstream until I was in college in the early 2000s. And a friend of mine gave me President Carter's book, An Hour Before Daylight, which is all about his growing up experience in Archery, Georgia, which is just a little hamlet. Now it's not really existing, but that was right outside of Plains. And his experience growing up on his father's farm, his primary relationships outside of his family were with Black people, sharecroppers on the farm. The unique experience of a young white boy in the 1920s and 30s, deeply segregated Southern culture, to be highly influenced, deeply influenced by Black people. That really was intriguing to me when I began writing about or reading, excuse me, about his growing up experiences. So the first thing I ever Googled about Jimmy Carter was not Jimmy Carter Camp David Accords or Carter Center or any of these kind of Nobel Peace Prize, but it was Jimmy Carter, Plains, Georgia. And the first thing that I saw pop up was that he taught Sunday school at Maranatha Baptist Church, the church he and Rosalind were members of for years in their post-presidency there in Plains, small little A-frame church. He would teach Sunday school to whoever wanted to come. I couldn't believe it that you could go be in a room that fit, you could squeeze in 250 people max, that you could go into a room that size and be in the presence of a former president, someone who quickly became my hero. After I read An Hour Before Daylight, I began reading, excuse me, about the resonance of Jimmy and Roseland's life in the world and their impact and influence on so many different people. And I just was so impressed with how they lived out their interpretation of their faith. And so 20 years ago, went to one of the Sunday school classes. Fast forward several years after that, I was in film in Nashville, music and film, and directed a film that was about race relationships in the Deep South, set entirely in plains, of course, with the unique angles of President and Mrs. Carter. We were honored to produce some of the last film footage of their lives, to actually have what will become the last interview of President Carter's life as a part of that. And I just fell in love with the community, with the people. Didn't know that what I was looking for was right there, and that was a quieter life, a more paced life, and knowing my neighbors. And so the last thing that President Carter would always say to people, they loved visitors. They loved people visiting Plains. And they would always say, "You're always welcome here in Plains." And so I think we're, at least I now as a Plains representative, if you will, a Plains citizen, I'm always trying to offer that welcome back to people. And I think that's what Jimmy and Rosen loved, was to see people from around the world intersect with their gentle and humble lives in Plains.
Right, so your film Plain Spoken, which was, an excellent title, by the way, it really touches on, the race relations in the community, and I thought it was, just really interesting, you speaking with all the different residents and just their thoughts about that, and was it a was it a e the people, when you were out there interviewing them, they seemed very at ease with talking about it. Did you sense that when you started the project that they would be, that the community would be at ease with talking about it?
I don't know exactly what I expected. The title, a tribute to our co-producer April Dace. We were about halfway through filming, and that title came up, and it's so perfect for the film. But I am son of a therapist, a conversationalist, a person who's interested in people and their stories. So I think I probably maybe sometimes naively assume that everyone's, with the right intent and the desire to just know somebody and hear their perspective and not shape it for my own benefit or for my own advantage. I feel like I feel like that's an easy yes, but I do realize people with a camera in their face uh, can have different feelings or different ways of even expressing themselves. I think that's something unique about the people of Plains, of Sumter County, of rural America probably, is there is less buttoning up. There's less need in their everyday lives to mask. There's less ability to mask what is actually happening. And so I think that comes out. But of course, in the topic of race relationships, it is interesting. These people live, I say these people, I'm one of them now. There's 600 of us living in a very small, a 1 mile radius of sorts. And so for black and white people to express their experience, their realities, their perceptions, knowing that will be paired together in a film's timeline, I do think takes some courage and some trust. And maybe, Jennifer, that was a part of the chemistry that we discovered between Plains people and me, that there was already a certain level of trust. I respect them. I love them and I respect them. This was not a way of coming in and look at rural people and how they talk about race, or
Yeah.
look about how a black person says their experience about this, or a white person says their experience about this. I really wanted to hear what was their experience. And what we find when we talk to people and try to listen to their stories is each person really has a unique perspective. You can't stereotype anyone. Um, there's not just one perspective per group of people.
Mhm. You mentioned how this was the last, recorded interview with Jimmy Carter, and did you have a sense of what the Carters, how they felt about this documentary, if they felt one way or another about it?
Some, well, they were obviously at ease to be involved, especially President Carter. And not that Mrs. Carter as well. Mrs. Carter was aging significantly by the time we first started filming. We have beautiful footage of her at church in her last days, and beautiful footage of her 95th birthday where she lit up the town with the dancing monarch sculpture, and beautiful footage of her serving her neighbors even in her 93rd or 4th year out in the heat, and serving. I was honored one of those food distributions, which was is named in her honor because she and some church ladies began finding out who needed food years ago. So all that to say, but about the content, I think President Mrs. Carter is so well versed in speaking honestly about they also are plains people. They also are plains spoken. And so to speak about these things is not seen as some kind of there's no need to protect the reputation of a town or of a place or of a subject matter. I think to honor is to speak honestly about it. And so I received nothing but an open door. And really, I was writing a note this morning to Beth Davis at the Carter Center just to say, thank you for all the goodwill you've shown my way because um, really, we came in when the Carters were at a tender age already
Yeah.
and for the people around them who became a little bit more hands-on to just help protect things that needed to be protected, they were really open door to us, and I can't be thankful enough. So even the Carters' goodwill is one step, but then to have the goodwill of those people who were kind of gatekeepers in those last years, we could not have done the film without their trust of us. So that's a beautiful exchange.
Yeah. Um, I want to get to another question about the film, but first, I just, want to talk a little bit about Rosalind Carter. And,
Mhm.
you know, people are mostly aware of a lot of the impacts she had, while she served as First Lady. um, you know, for East Wing magazine, her work in establishing a physical office in the East Wing of the White House is something, a piece of history that we focus on and sort of root in our own mission in covering First Ladies present and past, and how having an actual physical space, especially through my interviews with scholars and historians, show a level of power that these women and that role has. And so people probably know, that, Rosalind Carter was huge advocate for mental health. So much so that she had actual outcomes. She had a landmark federal legislation, the Mental Health Systems Act of 1980, which was designed to overhaul the community mental health and improve funding for mental health. People probably understand that she, by 1996, um, had advancements again in mental health with the Mental Health like Parity Act, where insurance companies were expected to treat mental health the same as physical health.
Mhm.
So these things are all very important, but there are these other stories that shine a light on in Plain Spoken, where we see Rosalind Carter, um, with a little more quiet power. And what I'm speaking about is your interview with Mary Prince, who has a very, really incredible story with the Carter family. Um, do you wanna tell us that story a little bit without maybe giving
Sure.
away too much of the documentary?
Well, it's okay. I think, Mary Prince is a fascinating figure in the Carter history and the Carter family, and definitely in Rosalind's history. So, Mary Prince was in prison when the Carters went to the governor's house, when President Carter, at time Governor Carter, went to the governor's mansion in Atlanta. That would have been in 1970. They were introduced to Mary because I don't always remember the details of kind of work programs for prisoners who, are showing good behavior or however they do that. So they're given some more freedoms. And so there was trustees, I think is what they call that, from the prisoners were trustees that worked in the governor's mansion doing different jobs and activities. And Mary was one of those prisoners. Now, Mary had been wrongly convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison. She was in a tussle. I believe it was, if I'm getting this right, it was her cousin and another person with a gun. Mary Prince got in the middle of that. There was a fatality that produced from that. That was not Mary Prince's fault, of course, but she was in the middle. She had a state appointed attorney. Of course, this is in Georgia in 1960 something, late 60s. And she never got to even meet with uh, that state appointed attorney or court appointed attorney. And so um, he told her to plead guilty and promising a lighter sentence. And indeed, she was sent to life in prison. It was just kind of all of it, just a total, you know, it was chaotic, and it did not. It was a reflection of the times for sure. A black woman, Mary Prince is a black woman, to kind of a tragedy of the court systems at that time, and racial inequity, et cetera. So she meets the Carters, uh, kind of not without giving all the way the story. There's elements of that story that are shown in plain spoken, and you can look it up. Mary Prince's story is not well known, which is very interesting because of how powerful it is. But as she became friends with the Carters through this organic relationship by working in the governor's mansion by day, plus Amy Carter, who was 3 at the time, she and Mary just became bosom buddies. And so Mary was then became the nanny for the Carters, for Amy, followed him to the White House. But Rosen was really, I did not know this until doing the film, even though I thought I knew Mary Prince's story. Rosen was the advocate to get Mary Prince's sentence or her case reopened, and eventually is what got her exonerated. So you have a white first family in Georgia in 1970 in the governor's mansion working on not on behalf but advocating for a black woman who was imprisoned for murder unjustly to get that exonerated, and then becoming the nanny of their 3-year-old white child. There's a lot of subject matter in that to think through, especially for the era of 55, 56 years ago. Mary Prince followed them to the White House as far as she continued to nanny Amy and really be a dear friend of the Carters, and then continued to even help raise grandchildren from there, and now lives down the street from me in Plains, and lived down the street from the Carters, and was with the Carters on their dying days, literally their dying day, each of them. And so, the if ever you get a chance to see Mary Prince and the Carter children or grandchildren, you immediately see the the depth of connection and influence and impact that this woman has had on generations of the Carter family. So it's a very profound story. Again, we were honored to how we got the experience to Mary Prince to say yes. I mean, I love her to death. She's a dear friend, but we were still getting to know one another, and she said, "Sure." And so we sat down with her. I hope at some point more of her story. We sat down with her about an hour and a half. Of course, she's only a few minutes in the film. So it also shows it's a character sketch of the Carters.
Yeah.
That color is not an element, that justice, they were justice seekers. Um, and so very Rosalynn too, very Rosalynn. But
Yeah.
she was the leader in that. Now, Jimmy became her parole officer, which never has a president ever been a parole officer. But Rosalynn was the tent pole. She was the spearhead for that act of seeking justice on behalf of one of her fellow human beings.
Yeah. It is just profound, really. Um,
And
all right.
again, why hasn't it been talked about more? I mean, I was getting phone calls from the BBC. How can we get in touch with Mary Prince? I was like, what's going on? But it's like certain people know, journalists and other people, but they've never really been able to. Mary has just lived a quiet life. It's very reflective of the Carters in a lot of ways. She's committed to her family and to her friends.
Yeah. All right, Andrew, we're going to pause the conversation for a
Okay.
second because I see an error has popped up on my screen
Oh,
um, that says error going live. So
I show us as live 19 and a half minutes in with 6 people on.
6 people on. Okay. So maybe we're fine.
I say let's keep going.
Okay. Let's keep going.
Yes.
Okay. Good. Good. Um, so, so plain spoken, I highly recommend, if you get a chance to take a look at the film, take a look at the film. You really do get a sense of, if you haven't been to Plains, this might just take you there. Um,
Yeah. Well, that's the hope, and by the way, one of our guests, Ray Wilder, said you were live in the chat, so we'll keep going.
yeah,
Uh,
thank you, Ray. Thank you, Ray. We appreciate that.
yes.
Um, so anyway, when you and I first met, we were talking a lot about plain spoken back then. And since then, you've had another really significant project that I wrote about for East Wing Magazine, and that is your book. Here it is. Um, More Than a President: Sundays with Jimmy Carter. And this is another, sort of step into Plain's experience with Jimmy Carter. You get an opportunity for anyone who didn't get the chance to attend uh, a Sunday school, visit in Plains there at the Marantha Baptist Church, and see Jimmy Carter in action. You can experience it through this book. And so when you and I were talking about your book, I was keenly interested in what Rosalynn's presence was, during these years when he was very busy doing his Sunday school. And so one of the vignettes that I picked out of the book and wrote about was something that Jimmy spoke at length about, and that was his obsession with time. And I just thought it was so interesting how he spent so much time talking about his obsession with time that really kind of he attributed to his relationship with his father, his time in the Navy, and how it really did impact his relationship and marriage with Rosalynn. And he was very open about it being a point of contention, and he always kind of being on her for being on time, and her kind of always just keeping him at arm's length.
Resisting.
Yeah, resisting, exactly. Um, and so obviously you remember when you're editing that, those transcripts for the book. What were some of your thoughts when you got to some of those points in the book where he's really revealing the relationship with Rosalynn?
Well, her presence was definitely strong even when it wasn't notated by her saying something, that was captured on audio or film. She was always present as long as she was in town or not sick. And just like President Carter, church life was a huge part of their life. She was often a commenter. She could be heard because there would be some feedback, or if say President Carter taught in a very conversational manner. He asked questions that were not rhetorical. He wanted feedback from the class, which is very traditional Sunday school. You can tell he grew up in the Baptist church in a Sunday school class, of course, much smaller, of 10, 12 people, probably not 200 people. But it's a dialogue. It's an experience where the teacher is not saying, I know everything, but we're digging in together to this ancient text. And so sometimes when there was maybe not a lot of feedback, or maybe you had a quieter crowd, he would say, Rosalynn, because he knew she would have some feedback. And sometimes her feedback wasn't always what he was maybe looking for too. She had her own mind, and I think that was a huge part of their draw to each other, was their own independent spirits coming together and a great respect for each other's minds and hearts. But I will say, I remember the first time I ever saw Rosalynn was, of course, when I went to Sunday school that first time 20 plus years ago. And President Carter would always come. The organ side is over on the right side. If you're in the sanctuary, he would always come strolling in, say hi to everybody. And sometimes she would be talking to people in the back, or doing her own thing, taking her own time. And so she would walk in maybe a couple minutes after he had started. He would acknowledge her. But I remember I was with two of my friends who were women. We were just out of college, and I was leading this trip. It was like I wanted to go do this, and they just thought, well, this is quirky. Let's go do it. And so, but they're very independent women, and Rosen came out of the side door to get seated. Jimmy acknowledged her, and one of the women that was with me said, "Now that's a vibe." And so she had a presence about her that was equal to his, in church. Now, he did often relate stories from their marriage, right? Because that would produce some good real life examples from his life that he could apply to the scriptures he was teaching, whether it was about patience, whether it was about unconditional love, whether, all these different kinds of things. Plus, he often used their marriage and Rosalynn as an example of their feelings about um, the elevation of women. That, in fact, in an ancient text that was um, born out of stories from a time where women were even further oppressed, I would say, or really did not have any voice at all. Of course, we know that's still true in many cultures around the world. We still know that that's a fight even here in the United States. But he would use as an example, Rosen to some degree would speak up at times because of Jesus's hallmarking of women, that was a bit of the upside down nature of Jesus's life, countercultural, was that he was hallmarking women, and that was visible in the scriptures that we have to read. And so all of that brought Rosalind's presence up because for Jimmy, women were extremely important in the context of a spiritual community. Our Rosen was a deacon. We have female deacons. We have a female interim pastor right now. So Maranatha, the fabric of Maranatha, that's one reason it was Jimmy as far as Maranatha goes and its public facing, it's outward facing to the world. But Rosen was a big part of that. So yeah, but the obsession with time was hilarious because you could tell she was like, whatever, like you do you, man. I'm gonna do me. And I think seeing that real life engagement between two longtime marriage partners is always charming and relieving. It's relaxing for everybody.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting too that, um, you know, in your book, Jimmy Carter realizes, he wakes up one day and realizes it's his wife's birthday, and he hadn't gone out and got her a present or anything, and what he ended up giving her was a note with, just a handwritten note with one line in it basically saying, "I will never say another word about, time," or I can't remember exactly how he phrased it.
Punctuality or lateness or
Punctuality.
uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Um, and and it certainly seemed like, based on, his, uh, his Sunday school, talk there, that was it, and that he sort of resigned himself to really, uh, giving that, sort of obsession up, at least as far as Rosalind was
In
concerned.
regards to Rosen,
So
yes. I definitely was on the receiving end of the obsession of his time once or twice because I am not much of
Really?
time. Yeah, so,
Oh.
I don't think he gave it up entirely, but I think out of his extensive love and their continual commitment, he started giving space around that to her, which that's a cool also to see marriages evolve over time. They don't stay stagnant, but a marriage to be alive, a relationship to be alive, which I think is very, very true for you know, R Rosalind was President Carter, and his history really drew me into planes, but Rosalind's just that vibe, that resonance with people and within the community, and then, of course, throughout the world, really started to take a hold of me once I started to become a more consistent visitor in town a little before the filming and then through filming. I remember reading one of her books, Helping Yourself Help Others, which, of course, was about caregiving, which is one of her major legacies. And that is tied to that mental health initiative because there's so much struggle with mental health among caregivers. But I remember reading some of the mental health aspects that you mentioned, that she was a part of advocating, spearheading, creating within legislation and such. And my dad, who's in the mental health space because he was a therapist for most of his career, I said, "Did you know about this? Did you know about?" And he was like, "Oh my goodness, those are things that daily affect how I worked." And he had no idea that Rosa was a huge part of spearheading and initiating those things. It definitely created this sphere of a deeper respect for her. But even getting to know her family, her younger sister Alethea, who is the last living sibling of her sibling group, and it very much reflects Rosen's demeanor and disposition. Just incredibly kind people um, who are very generous, and I just think the thread of whatever that which came through her parents to Rosalind and goes through her sister to her sister's kids and to Rosalind's children. I mean, that thread of Rosalind is still very much activated. Also, I think such a connector in the family, you know? To become president requires a lot of, and to become first lady too, that's a lot of life and energy given over to steward that journey into that position and then steward that position. I think Rosen was a real grounding force, though, in the family life, and I think that's special to note, um, that she was sort of, and that's often true of a mother in a family and a grandmother in a family, but it was true of Rosen as well.
Yeah. I think it's worth noting, especially, one of the goals of East Wing Magazine is to, um, n not only share, continue to share the stories of, first ladies, but also to show their impact. And I think, what's really interesting about the Carters right now is because of their both of their recent passings, you sort of get to see you have this you see their impact while they were still with us, and now we're going to start to see their impact, you know, um, in after their afterlife, right? So, um, and me as a journalist, I think one of the most profound contributions she made through mental health was the creation of the Rosalynn Carter Fellowship for mental health journalism. And that's just a program that, they bring in journalists and they train them how to write about mental health. They train them about, using destigmatizing language. And it's something as a journalist that, I'm fairly well versed in, and understanding that there are all kinds of afflictions, in the world that we talk about, we write about, and that, you know, we come from language that has been stigmatizing to, education and realization about how we can change that language, to change the outcomes for people. And I would say, just her contributions there for helping change the narrative about people, with mental health, and using language that destigmatizes it, is is evident in our everyday lives now. I think we see people who, we all know somebody who's dealing with some level of mental health, or we will all experience some level of mental health at some point in time, and we hope to be treated with the same kind of respect and dignity that somebody would have if they had a heart attack or something. So, um,
Yeah,
just
the well, journalists are so influential in our perceptions of things, whether we like that or not, it's true. We all intake media, and journalism is a part of good journalism is a part of good media, that helps us understand things that we may not be directly in contact with right now, that we may be directly in contact with in the future within ourselves or others, just as you expressed. But yeah, that carefulness with language, I think it's really, that is such a niche thing to do, what she did,
yeah,
and continues to do with the fellowship of journalists in regards to bringing light to how they express uh, mental health in their writings and in their reporting, and it shows the level and the depth of care she had for that subject to tackle kind of that. Because I mean, you look at the culture we're in, and media is all over the map, and what we intake is partially up to us, but partially up to our algorithm just by the way we search and find things, and so it becomes more and more imperative that there's a wider swab of, responsible, reporting, because I don't always get to choose what comes across my screen and what I hear. I mean, I have, hopefully a sound enough mind to go, "That doesn't ring true," or, "I don't know if that source is a great source, not interested," or whatever, but, we can't totally control the world around us, and so that's one way of helping to infuse a really sort of wild media world with some responsibility again, and I think that's how reflective the Carter's life, each of them too, help infuse responsibility in whatever they were doing. For we take responsibility for how we impact others, and of course, like you said, in their legacies, now their legacy is what lives on,
Yeah.
without their physical presence here. It's pretty amazing how much lives on and how, um, really, gritty and resonant it still is, which means they did a beautiful job because it doesn't require
Mhm.
their physical presence.
Mhm.
That's the perfect setup, you know?
Yeah. Um, so, you've also written a song about Rosalynn,
Yeah.
"Butterfly Fly." And can you tell us a little bit about, why you wrote the song, what the song
Yeah.
signifies?
Leanne Smith, Rosalind's niece, who lived in Plains for years and now lives just a town over in Americus, Georgia, uh, was a friend, is a friend, but, she and, Rosalind's niece from Jimmy's side, Kim, Billy's oldest daughter, Kim Fuller, and Tim Buchanan, a lifelong Plainser who lives right next to Rosalind's childhood home in Plains, and they have a lot of connectivity in their family through blood ties and friendship and relationships. They organized the first Butterfly Days weekend, which is our annual weekend. We're on our 5th annual coming up in August, but our annual weekend to just highlight Rosalind, and it's always the weekend around her birthday, which is August 18th. Well, for the first annual Butterfly Days, Tim and Kim and Leanne got together to orchestrate, and really, I believe Leanne and Tim spearheaded this to have Peter Hazel, who is a world famous sculptor, does a lot of fiberglass structures and stuff for Burning Man, which is a famous kind of some people consider it an out there thing, but a lot of people gather in the desert each year, Burning Man, to have a spiritual experience. And he creates these beautiful, wild sculptures out there. Anyway, he was a big fan of the Carters. He lives out west. And so he designed this wonderful dancing monarch sculpture that now lives or is installed in Rosalind Smith Carter Childhood Garden, which is the garden adjacent to her childhood home. And so it has lights, it has, 8 stalks and 18 butterflies for August 18th. And so we had a private little reception, etcetera, in the childhood garden for Rosen on her 95th birthday, which was that first Butterfly Days, and she came and flipped on the lights for the first time, and Peter Hazel was there, and Leanna, Kim, and Tim orchestrated it all. And Leanne asked, "Would you consider writing a song?" Me and one of my dear songwriter friends, Cindy Morgan, were coming to play music for the event, just some great outdoor kind of folky music. And I still lived in Nashville at the time. And I said, "Sure, let me try my hand at it." And so I came up with a little chorus, fly, 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 butterfly, fly. And because the monarch butterflies were kind of her entree into speaking about the environment
Yeah.
and being responsible for the environment. She cared about that. And then I thought, how can we then paint a picture of her life and all the responsibility and all the stewardship of her days that have impacted so many people? So I got digging into it and I thought, I really want a feminine perspective on this. Like, it can't just be written by a guy. We can't do that, not for such a great one. And so I called up Cindy, who knows me well, is a dear, dear friend, a wonderful storyteller and song. She came over one day. I helped her do some more research on Rosalind, and we started talking about Rosalind's life. And Cindy said, "What about something like this?" And she started singing, "Deep down in Georgia, high up in those pines, mom and dad and all the angels sang when she arrived." And then we got into a second verse talking about her and Jimmy. But then we got into the bridge into the last verse is my favorite part of it lyrically. And it says, "From a little white house to a white house, 800 miles away. Mm. Um, only God knows how to make this world a better place." And then the last verse says, "She walked into the shadows in the darkness of their minds, gave them all the love her heart had to help them see the light. Now, deep down in Georgia, high up in those pines, mom and dad and all the angels say, 'Fly, fly, butterfly, fly.'" And we're getting to sing this over her. It's one of the most momentous, just poignant moments of my life, these two heroes to be here. And to sing this lyric that we wrote, hoping to capture just some aspect, some element of who this woman is and how much she has done for the world around her. And then to have her now at 95 in a more tender stage of life, to sing that over her as she truly was living out the last days of her life when, the earth around her and all the earth and sky was starting to call her back to her home place, and so I we walked over because it was, it was outdoors and there was a lot of energy and we sang it once, but we knew at their table they might be able to hear everything. And so we walked over to their table and Cindy and I got down on our knees in the lawn while she was sitting in her chair and said, "Would you like me to sing some of that for you right here?" And she misunderstood at first. She was hard of hearing in their later years and she said, "Oh, I don't want to sing it." And I said, "No, no, 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 you don't have to sing it. How about we sing it for you?"
Yeah.
And we did right there for, up close as she started crying, and of course, President Carter said, "Can we get those words tomorrow? I wanna be able to see him," but, um, I truly believe that last verse was a summation of her life and that she was willing to enter in. You look at any picture of if you never met her, if you never knew her, you can look the visuals express it beautifully. Her willingness to dive deep into the lives of others, um and not only express empathy, but then that empathy translated into action that actually presented change. So you talk about power. That's the kind of power that digs down deep. It's a power that's a little countercultural. It digs super deep to raise people really high rather than come from on the top and control. It's this uplifting power. And Rosalind was such a beautiful picture and remains a beautiful picture of that power.
Yeah. Um, yeah, it's really touching. So you are directly involved in organizing Butterfly Days, and it's a 2-day
God
event.
help us.
Um, yeah, so it's a 2-day event. It's so interesting, to me, for sure, that, this year we have the 250th anniversary of, the founding of the country. We've had 2 new presidential sites come online this year with the, uh, you know, Obama Center in Chicago and also the Teddy Roosevelt Presidential Library up in Medora, North Dakota. So it's been a very busy year in the presidential sites world. And so when you're getting ready to, and I think this is really, fantastic for planes because it's an event that really, directly celebrates Rosalind. And her contributions and like you say, like her work, trying to, like your words, uplift, but uplift the monarch butterfly. And we all know, the plight of the monarch butterfly is in like steep decline right now. And, once this population declines, it can cascade into all,
Mhm.
other sorts of uh,
Problem.
populations of life. Yeah.
Mhm.
So it's really important. So what do you do in planes for the 250th and celebrating Butterfly Days for Rosalynn?
Well, we do a couple things. We do a lot of congregating, which I think is something Rosen loved community. And we have several presidential descendants that descend into plains. We've got a McKinley and a Cleveland and Lincoln and, of course, Carter family, Grant. So they come and kind of just bolster up from the outside. The DAR, which Rosen was a part of, our local, it's really a regional chapter will be a big part of hosting several things and making them nice. The former president general of the DAR will be in town. So we have some of those formalities that are real casual, though in planes there's nothing formal. And especially in August when it's hot. Um, and we do things. There's cooking demonstrations at Rosen's childhood home with her family and the first lady's man, Andrew Oak. And I'll sing for that. And they'll teach them how to make a peanut butter pie this year, just like Rosalind did. And so there's a lot of campy stuff, a painting party, real fun lunch with Lincoln. But there's a couple of key parts that I think were real integral to her life. One is the Rosalind Carter Memorial Food Distribution is that Saturday morning where we feed a couple of hundred families each month. We do this each month, but it coincides with Butterfly Days weekend. people in the region who are hungry, need some help filling gaps in their food supply, and Rosalynn was always paying attention to that, and now we do that through a drive-through, and it's an organized event, and so that will also take place Saturday morning that I think is very important. We do, a butterfly garden hands-on experience in the childhood garden, teaching about pollinators, hoping this year the Rosa Carter Butterfly Trail, which is its own thing, will be a part of that. And then on Sunday morning, we go to church. And this year we're doing something unique. We're doing a community-wide service at the Plains United Methodist Church, which of course is she attended the Methodist church in her growing up years, and then she and Jimmy attended Plains Baptist and then Maranatha Baptist. And so we're going to have some real unique elements there with our pastor, Dr. Reverend Aaron Hall. She, along with RT, the pastor at the Methodist Church, will create a really neat experience. We'll have lunch on the grounds afterwards, and then, which is very Southern thing. And then we'll walk across the street to the Carter Gardens, and we'll have the annual wreath laying ceremony at her graveside with everybody. And so those are some of the anchor events that feel very her to me. Some of the other stuff is fun stuff, which is inspired by her life, and we'll be painting butterflies at the painting party, that kind of thing. But it just, it's really a pretty calm and easygoing weekend where everyone gets space and time with one another in between events. And I don't know, my little experience with Mrs. Carter in her later years, that was very important for people. And in her community of Plains was people being together. And so we cultivate that while also trying to help express some of the messages that were important to her through our activities. And I don't know, it when they created it the first year, I don't know that they thought it would be anything but that year. And then it got a second year and a third year, and now it's an established part. And I'm so glad because Rosalind deserves her space of light. Uh, I remember when she passed away, and everyone thought President Carter would pass away quickly behind her. He was already in poor health, and you know that's that's safe assumption for people who married 77 years. And he didn't. He hung on. And I remember my mom. So this is all just conjecture, but my mom, I was telling her about it. I said, I wonder why he's hanging on. Now he did his job. He saw her through. And my mom said, "Well, he still has his mind, which means he still has his will." And she said, "Love like that will hang on so she gets her chance to be celebrated." Because we know that if he had died quickly thereafter, his protocol would have been they would have, basically been buried together essentially. And so she got her whole time, and all the articles that came out and all the
Yeah.
tributes that came out, and people who never knew these things about Rosalind Carter finding out about her magnificent life, and it's a sweet thought, and it
Yes. Um, so, you know, every time you and I talk, especially since the Carter's passing, I do always like to check in with you on how the town is, you know, transitioning from that event. And especially, you're getting ready for this event, So give us a little, picture into Plains right now and how are folks doing there?
Yeah, Planes holds up, and it's not a simple transition. That's a big presence lost, as far as a physical presence. I think we are transitioning to the place where visitors no longer come expecting the kind of, the Carters were so accessible in town. And that has started to already make its transition. I think in formal ways with the park service, that tends to all the sites, which really is the hub of our welcome to people in and the downtown merchants on our kind of one lane strip, downtown strip. All those people are finding their rhythm, their method of being viable because of the Carter's wisdom in stewarding the Boyhood Farm. We will, it's hoping in just a year or so, we don't know, but that the Carter House will be open, which will be a huge event and will draw more
Yes.
visitors.
Yeah.
The Carter Gardens opening, the high school, the campaign depot, all these places are right here in town because we're not a big radius. So those things really keep town moving in the right direction and are protected um, by federal government, So that's a really beautiful thing that they set up. But, personally speaking, each person's gonna have their own experience, have their own way of responding and reacting. Um, I think that all comes out in time in a real even way. The Carters will always be Plains, Plains will always be the Carters. That's just cemented in time now. And so how that is recognized and celebrated and continues to be stamped into the passport of our future, uh, will take on different shapes and sizes through the influence of everybody. But you know what? Someone told me a long time ago about a big celebrity personality that I knew, and some people were trying to control the legacy of that and stuff, and I've never really loved control. That's not my I don't like to be controlled, and I don't think I like to control a lot either, but, um, they said no one owns them, and I would say of Jimmy and Rosalynn Carter, that's the beauty of people being alive and continuing to live through their legacies. No one owns them, and so we all got the everyone in their own way, whether they met them, spent time with them, or never came across their path personally, but read about them in books or whatever, watched them online. Everyone has their own experience with the influence and the lives of martyrs, and that's important and it's meaningful and there's space for it. And so my hope and plans is that we continue to make the space for all those different people that they influence and will continue to influence well beyond my lifetime.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's beautiful. Um, well, I do just want to like show your book again.
You're very kind, you're very kind, and
Yes.
those are President Carter's words, so that's what an honor to steward those. Thank Jennifer, you're such a
Yes. Yes. And you can see I was, very busy with it.
coming through.
And also, Plain Spoken, available on Amazon Prime if people are interested in taking a close look at planes and the people and the stories there. Um, and do you have any other projects coming up that you'd like to share?
Uh, there's some elements. More Than a President's gonna come out on audiobook this year, which is cool because 'cause that'll be
That's
largely
cool.
his work,
Yeah.
and so people can experience it in a different way. The paperback edition will come out with a little revision, and, so More Than a President will continue to be a part of what I like sharing and speaking about, and then yeah, there's a couple documentaries in the work and things like that, not specifically related to the Carters, but, um, yeah, just hoping to be a good citizen of my hometown now of Plains and hope to honor people there by doing the best I can with whatever it is that comes across my desk.
Yep, and I'll just mention one more time that, if people are interested in Butterfly Days and heading out to Plains, that is Saturday, August 15th and Sunday, August 16th.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah,
Yep.
so good luck with the project there, the
Thank
event,
you.
and thank you for,
Yes.
sharing your experiences
Well,
today.
congratulations for 3 years. Congratulations for going live on Substack successfully. Uh,
Yeah.
congratulations. But really, East Wing Magazine, there's was a need, and you're filling that need, and that is to, hallmark, the women who have been a part of, the structure, the infrastructure, the building, and the sustaining of our nation, which is a group of people. And so and I think an incredibly underrated but, huge part and will continue to be a huge part of our future moving forward. And so I always say, let's look to the women for a few good cues, and you're helping us do that.
Ah, well, thank you. Thank you for everything you do as well, and be well.
Yes. Now let's see if we can get off of the live
I
successfully,
know,
right?
let's see if we can get out.
Okay.
Where's the exit? So, all right.
Thank
Thank you, Andrew. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.